Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. New week, new theme. We're going to be looking at unusual post rock. I don't quite know what that means, but I'm hoping that it has more momentum and direction and changes to it than post rock typically does. Um, Post rock does what it does very well, it's just not typically my cup of tea. So maybe that's what's unusual about this stuff is that it's post-rocky, aiming for that unified wall of sound and atmospheric stuff, but there's elements in it that fit more traditional mainstream pacing, possibly, or maybe just having more sections in general. This is a 12-minute song, and post-rock, I could easily see this just being a 2 or 3 section track. So I don't know. We'll see what Silver Mount Zion is bringing to us today with God Bless Our Dead Marines.
They put angels in the electric chair, the electric chair, the electric chair. Straight up angels in the electric chair, the electric chair, the electric chair. They put angels in the electric chair, the electric chair, the electric chair.
Yeah, so dissonance is already a strong component of this track.
And no one knew or no one cared, but burning stars lit up their hair, and burning stars lit up their hair, and crawled to heaven on golden stairs. And oh, how we to It's fresh meat in the club tonight. God bless our dead Marines. Someone had an accident above the burning train. Well, somewhere distant.
It's so interesting how I've consistently had difficulty figuring out if this is in 3 or 4, and this section is no different. Yeah, I think this is in 4 though, primarily because of the piano progression there. But the bass still works in 3 note groupings. So the build up, the crescendo, I thought we were going for an accelerando too like last time, but maybe where the timing's weird though, like nobody's ever exactly on the beat. Really wide production. I don't know why I'm just picking up on that. Those lower drums are way out on the sides. It's unrelentingly haunting as well. Like the atmosphere just does not let up on this tension. And a lot of the dissonance in the melody tonality really leans into the darkness that's already present in the chord progression. I was gonna say, it's not over yet. We got like 3 minutes left. Really big Canon. And see, this is in 3.
When the world is can't be on, but don't we was all a chance was as beautiful as snow. When the world is can't be on, but don't we was all a chance was as beautiful as snow. When the world is can't be on, but don't we was all a chance was as beautiful and strong. When the world is can no one be well, but a dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can no one be well, but a dreamt we was all beautiful and strong.
Yeah, so definitely unusual post rock because is it over? Yeah. Because it's folk? What? So bear with me for a second. A lot of folk rock uh, tends to be simple, unified, foundational work. Usually, so sort of combination of guitar, sometimes vocals, sometimes some light percussion, and occasionally maybe a melody to go along with this. The guitar can be swapped out for a piano, just anything that's going to be playing chords and providing the chord progression. Usually just one or two musical sections. And then a heavy emphasis on the vocals, so that the story can be told over the music. That's kind of an appropriate description of this. But if the musical backdrop were less mainstream, I need a good word for this, and I don't know what it is. Uh, pop rock doesn't fit either. At least to me, folk has a very specific sound to it that is poppy in its composition, but not poppy in its sonic qualities. But anyways, like stuff like Bob Dylan, right? The Decemberists, I think, are another folk band. Um, but like instead of having that palatable foundation in the music, we used post rock as a foundational building block. And post rock brings some similar ideas of simplification, but it does so through a unification where everything comes together to create this overwhelming sound, this wall of sound concept. And so we have this idea of music that gets out of the way for the lyrics, for the vocals, sorry, and a lyric heavy song where the story of the lyrics being told are one of the more important parts of it, with the music simply being, I don't want to call it set dressing, but the atmosphere, the emotion, right? Setting the scene for the story. But instead of just mere chords, we use a wall of sound. it's kind of genius because musically it does what post rock does. It's a lot of repetition, which is what folk does, which allows them to kind of overlap a little bit there, and work really well innately together. But it doesn't really move a lot. It's a lot of layers. We do have the slow burn in here. We actually have two slow burns, I think, where we slowly stack more and more layers on top of the song to increase the atmospheric complexity to it. The layers aren't always concerned with providing more context as well as providing more description, right? You can think of it as shifting from, I don't know, like a child's drawing of a person in front of a house to, a teenager's drawing of a person in front of a house to an adult to a master artist, right? We're refining the details and giving more information to it. More so than some slow burns which recontextualize it. Maybe it adds counterpoint. Maybe it adds a polyrhythmic idea. And it showcases what we've already seen in a new light rather than what happens here, which is just giving us more information to process what's going on. And so we have these slow burn moments and we add in more and more atmospheric and emotional texture to it over time. But the vocals are kind of the key. They sit on top of it, which is a bit odd for me. I think I'm trying to. Have we listened to any post rock with vocals? I think that's another unusual thing here. When I think of post with vocals, I tend to think of post metal. And we use growls and fry screams, and they get tucked into the wall of sound. They become another texture. Stuff like the ocean. And, kind of blanking out on it because that's the only. Oh, Cult of Luna. Right? I think. I think Cult of Luna is post metal. But post rock with lyrics. Nothing's coming to me off the top of my head. And that doesn't mean we haven't checked it out, but we passed like 1,100 videos recently. Or maybe it was 1,100 unique bands. Either way, we've checked out a lot. My memory's going to. At one point, my memory's going to get flaky. That happened a long time ago. But yeah, so this just sounds odd to me to begin with because I'm not used to vocals on top of this long form atmospheric exploration. But we put the vocals on top. We don't try to push them into the mix. They sit on top of everything. Very mainstream style. They're given emphasis in the mix. Very folkish, and it's very easy to both absorb the atmosphere and the emotion of the song while listening to the lyrics and taking in the story that they're telling as well. And that's really where this crossover shines, is that both styles of music are exceptionally patient. One's just a hair bit more static than the other. And I say a hair bit because both styles of music, folk and post rock, can be exceptionally static. It's just post rock tends to find movement in its rigidity via the layers, whereas folk gives you everything at once. And so they're really not that far different. It makes a lot of sense how somebody could come to this conclusion and make a post rocky folk track. Um, yeah, it's one of those things where you're like, what are you? How could you do that? Post rock and folk are so different. Then you listen to it and you're like, well, that actually makes a lot of sense now. And it's one of those things that, at least for me, if someone had told me, I might find it difficult to envision specifically what they're talking about. But somebody in this band envisioned it, and they made it, and it makes perfect sense. And now that sounds in my head, I'm like, yeah, it makes sense to me too. I didn't have the creativity to come up with it. But yeah, so that's kind of how the two genres work well together, and what makes this a bit unusual in the realm of post rock. There are a couple of things I want to touch on. I don't know how long this analysis is going to be since it's kind of it's a 12-minute song of one idea. So there's not a lot to break down. But I do want to touch on a few things before we hit the lyrics and wrap this up. The first is dissonance. It was present at the very beginning. This is something that makes sense within the realm of post rock, a little bit less so in folk, though that could just be that I've listened to more palatable folk, and I haven't been exposed to some stuff that feels a bit more indie, has a rawer vocal idea going on. The vocals here would fit very well in Midwest emo or indie rock. In fact, the one that I'm going to jump to, the one that stands out in my mind, is the Microphones. Their vocalist is similar to this in that I don't think that they're a fantastic vocalist, but they're good enough. When they need to be close enough in pitch, they can be. But they also recognize the importance of being out of tune pitch wise with other instruments and utilizing dissonance as a texture for the vocals in comparison to the music around them and how it can evoke specific emotions and feelings. And that's what happens throughout a lot of this. I think it was only the third pitch in here, and I was like, wow, that was really sharp. And that was really, it was the third note in, but it was also what we were going to see of predominantly. When we got to the piano and vocal duet, I think it was the second time that we brought the song down to a bare minimum. And it was just the two of them. The piano did chords plus the melody line, and the melody line was the same as the vocal line. It was pretty accurate with hitting the pitches. A little sharp, a little flat in some places, but again, I think it's a little bit of character. It's not this, perfect vocalist. And they showcase that even when they're aiming for tonality with another instrument, or harmony, I should say, with another instrument, they're not going for perfect harmony. But there are plenty of notes in here where just halfway to the next note. If he's supposed to hit an F, he's halfway to the F sharp. Like there's so much extra pitch, I guess we could call it, on the note. And sometimes it's passing notes, sometimes it's the one that he holds for several seconds, several minutes. No, there's none in here. There's several seconds. Um, and it was grating to begin with, but it grew on me, much in the same way that a lot of Midwest emo and indie tends to grow on me in that same way, and it's because of the emotional factor. If the music hadn't had been what it was and wasn't aiming for the specific emotions that they were, the vocal dissonance would have been jarring. And it was at the beginning, before I understood the identity of the song, before we got all the extra context to it. But as we added more layers on, as we got to, 9, 10 minutes into the track, and there's been an overwhelming element of tension to the song, and other instruments have introduced and played around with this dissonance in the same ways, you begin to see it as the standard for the track, and the vocals, they stand out less. They become less jarring, and it's just the texture of the song. But it certainly adds to the emotion as well. This is a tense song, as I just mentioned, but there's also a sweeping melancholy to it. There isn't a moment that goes by that isn't drenched in sadness. There is the whole song to me feels like the verbalization of uncontrollable weeping. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody. I hope so. But yeah, like nobody in the song is crying when they sing, but that's all I can hear when they sing is sobbing. And it's achieved a little bit through the vocal delivery, but also majority in through the music. There is a lot of really dark chords in here. There's a lot of tense chords. There's very little resolution. When we talk about some songs, I talk about complexity and emotion. That's kind of not here. The emotional landscape, at least from what I felt, is rather one dimensional and straightforward. It is just consistently sad and overwhelming. And the tension just adds to that. If your heart begins to ache listening to the sorrow in the chord progression, the tension, the lack of resolution, the dissonance is only going to make it ache more. And that's where that texture specifically comes into play to augment and supplement the emotion that's already put into the music. And they find other ways to augment this as well. One way, of course, is volume dynamics. These are usually accompanied with width dynamics as well. When the songs get louder and louder, they get wider and wider, and it becomes overwhelming. It reaches a point of, really filling out the sound sphere to a moment where it almost feels like a weight bearing down on you. We also augment the tension and melancholy through what was the other one? There's another dynamic quality in here, and I don't remember what it is. Oh, yeah, the accelerando. It makes. Because, see, the song is kind of slow, which gives it a dreary, gives it a lethargy throughout most of the track, but we did have that one moment where the pace picked up and picked up and picked up and picked up and picked up, and it became very urgent and present and now. There's a term for now that I really want to use here. I can't think of what it is. Um, but it immediate. That's the word I want. Whatever they're feeling, whatever problems are making them feel like this, whatever issues they're singing about, they're wanting to show that it does bear, that they do bear a weight from it. It makes it easy to drag your feet and to allow the weight of your sorrow to hold you down. But that doesn't make the necessity for resolution any less prominent. And that regardless of this, we need to push forward. Now, granted, the song does slow back down, and we don't ever revisit that idea of the accelerando again. In fact, the song kind of goes the opposite direction the next time it decides to make a change, and we simplify down to just the vocal and piano section I was talking about earlier. And then, of course, a couple minutes after that, we stop the song completely. I thought it was over, and we enter into the outro. And the outro is a canon. A canon is when one person or group starts singing, and some beats later, another group will begin singing the exact same part. They're just going to start later than the other. And the first group will not have necessarily finished their line yet. So they could be in the middle of it, and now this group is singing it. And you can hear it perfectly in here, where group A starts singing, and as they get to like the fourth word, the next group comes in, and they're always, specifically here, 3 beats behind. This is both a simplification and a growth. We have brought it down to just vocals, but there are 10, 12, 15, 20 vocalists here. I honestly don't know. It's a very big production. And I really like this moment because, at least to me, it's a plea for humanity. I don't know specifically what the song is about. It does seem to be social commentary, revolving around humans and maybe even humanity. We'll get into the lyrics in a bit, but I like how they said, let's just wipe out the instruments and let's use just the human voice. And it's almost like a call to remember that we are humans. Um, and I really like that idea. And it brings in more of this atonality because our lead vocalist wasn't really aiming for pure harmony. And now we're introducing people who aren't the lead vocalist of the band. Some of them might not be strong singers, some of them might not even be good singers. But I think that almost makes the idea stronger. Regardless of who you are, regardless of what your skill is, your voice is still important. At least that's what I got out of the ending. Granted, I do think some of these sections went on a fair bit too long. There was a ton of repetition in the vocals as well. Not just musical, which the whole song is based around, like the two, three maybe different sections. So repetition's baked into the track as a whole, but lyrically, even, it's based around a lot of repeated ideas. And even that ending, as much as I loved it as an ending, I think it really only works because the rest of the song is as long as it is. But there were a couple of moments I was like, okay, we could wrap this up a little bit, especially the ending. I thought after the eighth time of doing that, we were fine, but they wanted to rise up in complexity and volume and width and then bring it back down, taking just as much time. It took about a minute to get up to the top, and then we came back down and we reached a lower bottom than before, where we came down to once again just a single vocalist, but with the voice cracking, very little air pressure, really actually getting some of that fry crackle in there. Just not a lot of energy at all. Just like the end of this person's willpower. And the volume came down. So yeah, I mean, it works artistically. And maybe if I'm more engaged with the lyrics of it all, second, third, fourth, fifth time around, it might have more impact. But I will say, for a 12-minute post rock song, I kind of thought it was over rather quickly. It's really only towards the end when it started to feel a bit long for me, and that's interesting. I don't know if it's the vocals. I don't know if there's something specific about their composition. I don't know, but it didn't wear me down like a lot of post rock does. And there's points for that. Yeah, this is a heartbreaking song. It's very anti-war, and it speaks to the nonchalant attitude that those in power have when they send people to war. Um, the opening line that we heard over and over and over, they put angels in the electric chair. The annotation says that it's a metaphor for sending people to their deaths in war. I guess it kind of works, but at least to me, it's a bit of a stretch. I don't read it that way. I can read it that way, but that's not ever where I think I would have put it. Um, but the idea of sending people to their own execution, yeah, I mean, I guess that works on both levels. Um, verse 3 says, and all them vulgar kings on their dirty thrones, speaking about those who rule us and how none of them are clean in any way. There's always something dirty going on. Dirty trades, dirty money, uh, who's profiteering off of what. Verse 4 speaks to about how the vulgar princes sleep somewhere peacefully distant from the war while accidents happen above burning trees, so God bless our dead Marines. That, they're out there in these hellish conditions with, death knocking on their door. And the people who sent them there and their kids, even, I think specifically is the point of this, is that we send our young to war. At least in America, we have recruitment starting as young as, what is it going to be, like 12? I remember I don't know if this is still around, but when I was in middle school, which is 12 to 15 years old, we had a junior ROTC. You could sign up and you get your camo suits and you practice marching, you practice all sorts of stuff. I don't know. I never did it, but yeah, it's getting kids ready to enter into the military when they get out of school. And then, of course, there's also the ROTC program in high school, which is 15 to 18, 15 to 19. And then once you get out of high school, you can go straight into the military. You got 7 years of experience of, learning the discipline and the terminology and doing PT and stuff like that. It's kind of gross, but we send or they send our kids out there, but their kids sleep at home. They're princes sleeping peacefully. Um, and yeah, I think the purpose of using the term vulgar princes when we've already talked about the kings earlier is very specific. It's to draw that parallel between their kids and our kids, the 1%'s kids versus the 99%'s kids. Verse 5 speaks to specifically, I think, PTSD. It says, troubled hearts map deserts and they rarely do come back. So even if they come back from the war, they still have a troubled heart. And it's difficult for those hearts to come back, even if the bodies do. And it's a laundry list of ways that um, they have lost people who went into, who were sent off to war. They came back broken and ended up losing their lives to other things. He lists cocaine and smack, oceans, hills, suicide and pills, monsters and shame, marriage and blame, worry and wealth. It's just really depressing. And then, of course, for the last 3 minutes of the song, we get the refrain, when the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. That as long as there is war and hatred out there, we're never going to be a strong race, right? Humanity as a whole will always be fractured. Um, as long as there is one sick group of people, then humanity is sick. But our vocalist and all of the vocalists by the end of the track envision a world where we can get past that, where we have no more need for war. So yeah, the melancholy, the weight, the immediacy of needing to fix this, whether it's finding world peace somehow or just finding better ways to deal with war, or maybe finding better ways to de escalate. So many different ways that we could not send people to war and attempt to make this world healthy. It's a very immediate problem, but it also feels like we're spinning our tires anytime we try to get somebody in power to recognize that. So yeah, I think a lot of the musical decisions here fit really well with the topics and themes of the lyrics, and it really comes together into something that is quite effective at delivering this message in a way that appeals well, to the side of us that makes us human. Those are my thoughts on Silver Mount Zion's God Bless Our Dead Marines. What did you think of this? Did you enjoy it? Was there anything that stood out to you? Anything I said that you'd like to correct or add on to, or maybe just give me your own perspective on? Let me know. down in the comments. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. We have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, check you guys tomorrow. We'll continue on with this week's theme of unusual post-rock. Forgot what it was called. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, or whenever you choose to watch my videos.